You're watching the 2018 Legatus Summit.
About 9 years ago, I was at the Dana Point Summit, and I cooked a meal, which I'm going to be doing a little later today. And I remember Mr. Monahan tasted my food, and he said, "It's good. It just won't box well." Just the fact that he tasted my food was like a great honor for me, and I was just in the back in the green room, and Mr. Monahan came up to our next speaker, and he said, "I read your book." How amazing is that? And this book is something that you should read. It is written by a Harvard graduate and Rhodes Scholar and a devout Catholic. It is written by Aurora Griffin, whose topic today is How I Stayed Catholic at Harvard. Author of the recent book, with 40 tips for faithful Catholic students, Griffin reveals what's necessary for keeping faith intact at a modern university involving academic life, community, prayer life, and service realms. So while at Harvard, Griffin was the president of the Catholic Student Association, founded a chapter of the Daughters of Isabella, and graduated magna cum laude in 2014 in the top 5% of her class with a degree in classics. Additionally, she holds a graduate degree from Oxford University and plans to attend Stanford Graduate School of Business next year, and currently works as a writer for the Catholic University of America. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Aurora Griffin.
Good morning, Legatus. I am so pleased to be here with you. I grew up with Legatus. Legatus kind of feels like my family in a way. That's partially because my parents attended their local chapter meetings in the Conejo Valley when I was growing up. Another reason is that I met some of my older siblings and my heroes in the faith through Legatus. That would be shout out to Peter Kraft and Scott Hahn. And I think there may be an even deeper reason why I find Legatus so familiar. My family has been in business in this country for at least 6 generations. Some of the family lore says even more. We've been Catholic for 3 generations. And so the idea of bringing together business and our faith, doing business, doing good in the world for the church, is in my blood. And it looks like it may be in my future, since I'm planning to attend Stanford Business School in the fall. But we're not here to talk about that today, as close as that is to all of our hearts. We're here to talk about my book, How I Stayed Catholic at Harvard. And I want to tell you how I kept my faith at a secular school, how I think you can help your children do the same, why I have so much hope for the next generations of Catholics who are coming up even through these secular institutions. When I wrote my book, I did so with them in mind, really. It's a guidebook for them. But in the last year and a half or so since the book came out, I've been noticing that some of the people who really need to hear my message are the parents. So if students worry, am I going to be able to find friends? Am I going to miss out on everything that college has to offer if I'm serious about my faith? Well, parents worry too, and they say, are my children going to be persecuted if they take their faith seriously? Or even worse, are they going to forfeit their soul to try to gain the world? So I wrote How I Stayed Catholic at Harvard for parents and for students who are thinking about these questions. It's a roadmap. It's 40 bite-sized chapters using my life as an example. Now, this isn't 40 things that I did perfectly and you should do too. A lot of these things are things I did badly and then realized how they were important precisely because I was doing them badly. So I try to get across 3 main points in this book. The first is that everything that I got out of my college experience, all of the best parts, came to me because of and never in spite of my faith. I think the best example I have, and I'll tell you the whole story in a minute, was how I won a Rhodes Scholarship by being super Catholic. And the second is that no matter where you send your students to school, there will be opportunities for them to grow in their faith. And I mean that because my senior year of Harvard, we were literally under attack from Satanists. And this was the time when we most came together and most grew in our faith as a community. So don't despair if you're sending students to secular campuses. Sometimes the more secular, the more inspirational. And then the last point I'm going to make is that each and every one of us, all of your students and all of us sitting in the room, are called to be saints. And I want to ask you to think about what you're doing about that right now. Okay, so let's talk about that first point. That all of the parts of the college experience, all the best parts, came to me because of and never in spite of my faith. So when I think about the college experience, the first thing that I think about are these lifelong friends, right? Everyone says you make your best friends in college. And because of my faith, this was true. There was a girl in my freshman hall who I actually didn't even like that much when we met, but we got to know each other. She started tagging along with me to Mass. And she became my roommate, she became my best friend, and we will be friends the rest of our lives. And our faith was really what brought us together. I think my social circle also formed around the Catholic faith, insofar as there was this ragtag group of Harvardians that went to Mass in the morning before their classes. So these were people who had nothing in common with each other other than their faith. They were different majors, different extracurricular activities, and if I might say so, sometimes clashing personalities. But we all got up in the morning, we did our prayers together, we went to Mass, put that first, and by doing so, we became a little family away from our families. And that core ends up becoming important in a story I'll tell you later. When I think of the college experience, I think of learning from academics who are masters in their fields, these greats. And one of the greats who I met as a classics major was this very dramatic lecturer. He had this beautiful, grandfatherly voice. And he would deliver orations in Latin. Everyone would applaud at the end of his lectures. So if you can imagine this guy standing up in a lecture hall like this and giving a lecture on Latin grammar, and everyone is on their feet at the end. But that's just the kind of guy he was. And I remember going to class in the morning and then hearing that same grandfatherly, beautiful voice echoing through the church at Mass. I looked up, and there he was, the great lecturer, lecturing. So we struck up a conversation after Mass. He became a mentor, a recommender, and now a lifelong friend. I think an important part of the college experience is cultivating your leadership. All that stuff that you can tell interviewers and potential companies that want to hire you that you've actually done during college. For me, a lot of that stuff came through leadership in the Catholic community, founding the chapter of the Catholic sorority, leading the Catholic Student Association. So, all right, finally, I think when I think of college, I think of having a time when I really made these decisions about who I was and what I was doing for myself. Right? For a lot of students, this is the first time that they really have to just decide what to do with their time, how to respond to being in situations where people are asking them to do things that conflict with their values. And I think how you answer these questions and how you respond is a huge part of who you become. And our faith gives us all the tools we need to not only avoid crash driving, like a lot of my peers found themselves doing at Harvard, but to soar. I think the best example that I have of this, how sometimes refusing to forfeit your faith wins you the whole world, comes through the Rhodes Scholarship. So this is a bit of a story because it's a bit of a process. The first thing they make you do if you want to apply for a Rhodes Scholarship is to get the institution, so Harvard, to endorse your application. So you have to apply to the school to apply for the scholarship. So I did that. The people in the career office were not super enthusiastic. I had a good GPA, I had good leadership, but I was super Catholic, and there wasn't really any hiding that. So when I went to my 8 recommenders, I believe 6 of whom were Catholic, several of them said something like, yeah, we can't like make you seem less Catholic. It's like the Catholic stuff is what you do. But you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, so why don't you go for it? So I applied, I got my letters together, and I was as surprised as any of my recommenders when I was invited to the final rounds of interviews in California. So I flew back from Boston to LA and sat in this big downtown fancy law firm and went through what was intentionally a psychologically tortuous process. So they bring everybody in, they make everyone interview one by one with 8 former Rhodes Scholars. You know nothing about them. They've had weeks to do all of their homework on you and find out the trickiest, hardest questions they can possibly answer you. And as if that isn't intense enough, then what they do is they take all of the candidates and they make us wait in a room next door while they deliberate for like 3 or 4 hours. And they don't let you leave. So I went in and I did my first interview, me and these 8 important people. And they said things like, so what do you think of the church's abuse scandal? Fortunately, actually, that's not a hard question to answer, right? I'm not going to be like, yeah, that was great. Really glad. No, so that's horrible. But these are not examples of people being too Catholic. These are examples of people not being Catholic enough. So it was some of those types of questions, a lot of what ifs and gotchas. But there was a lot of grace in that moment. I'm not typically much of a comedian, but like, I was feeling so jolly, and like as the questions went on, I just became more elated and happy and making jokes. And I think that like caught them off guard. I think they had expected to kind of pick away at me until I was defeated. Okay, so I get to the end of this interview. They say, thank you very much. We admire your faith. Isn't that nice? We admire your faith, but we are unlikely to give this scholarship to someone so religious. We don't want you to use this scholarship to then go and tell people to be serious about their faith. I mean, look, it's exactly what I've been doing. That's fine. They knew it, I knew it, but that's fine. So I come out of this room thinking that I wasn't a serious contender. And I go back into the green room with all of the candidates who are trying to sit around and talk about anything but the Rhodes Scholarship. And naturally, one thing leads to another, and we get talking to each other about abortion. The room versus me. So we're having these debates, and the panel next door comes and says, Aurora, we'd like you to do a second interview, so please come back, we have more questions for you. I was like, oh no, did they like have a mic in this room, or what's been going on? They put me in the hot seat and they say, okay, you're on President Bush's Bioethics Commission. It is the year 2000, and you need to decide what to do about stem cell research. And I hemmed and hawed a little. Oh, this is a hard question. Oh, the reason I'm asking you for money is to go study such hard questions. And they said, nope, we need an answer. And I said, okay, fine. I've been sitting in the other room talking about how life is sacred since conception. And I couldn't tell you anything but embryonic stem cell research violates the sanctity of life. So their faces were inscrutable. I kind of walked out in silence thinking, all right, that was my big moment. I could have, if I just told them what they wanted to hear, then I probably could have used the scholarship to, go talk about my faith to other people, and but I had to tell the truth. But isn't it funny how things work out? Because it was precisely that moment that won it for me. The judges came in. They told me and my other peer out of the 15 that we had been selected. And one of the judges pulled me aside and said, "We knew what you were supposed to say. There wasn't hiding the fact that you were Catholic on your application. All of your recommenders talked about it for some reason. But we needed to know that you had character. We aren't the moral police. We wanted to know that you were willing to stand up for what you believed in." So it was just such a grace. And I guess in today's climate, there's a lot of people who are trying to decide between speaking the truth and keeping their careers or getting things that they've wanted for their whole lives. And at least in my case, I can't say this always happens, but at least in my case, it worked the other way around. And I hope that that's maybe an encouragement for somebody who's trying to think through these decisions themselves. Let's talk about this second point, which is that you can stay Catholic wherever you go to school. Harvard was actually an awesome place to be Catholic. If you're worried about your students going to secular universities or the general millennial iPad carrying generation going to universities and losing their faith, it's not a foregone conclusion. Just as I know you guys know, sending your students to a Catholic university is not a guarantee that they will come out Catholic. So, of course, there are a few phenomenal Catholic schools. I'm going to give a shout out to the university that I currently work at, the Catholic University of America, is really serious about their Catholic identity, and I couldn't be more proud to be working with them right now. Then there are ones that we know aren't as good, and we don't need to talk about this, because we already know who they are. They know who they are. All right. To me, the defining moment of my time as a Catholic at Harvard came when our faith was absolutely under attack by literally a group of Satanists. Like, you cannot imagine a group that is more diametrically and vehemently opposed to our faith. So they wanted to hold a satanic ritual in which they stole a host from the local Catholic church and desecrated it in the basement of the freshman dining hall. So final week of finals, senior year. I'm busy with stuff, trying to keep up my GPA that I've been working on for 4 years and thinking about the future. Everybody else is busy too. I think that was part of their strategy, by the way, kind of sneak this in when nobody else was looking. But there was no ignoring it. I was walking from the library back to my dorm through the yard, and I saw a poster with a picture of Satan on it. And it said the Satanic Temple of New York is going to hold this ritual in Annenberg Dining Hall. And so I immediately, I did what millennials do. I started a text chain and said, does anybody know about this? What's going on? Nobody, there were murmurs that it was happening, but nobody had any plans to do anything about it. The answer was always, well, yes, I'm busy. Somebody else is going to take care of it. And there really was a moment of deep conviction where I was looking at all of the things that I had to do for my finals and to be a good steward of the gifts I was given. And then also to realize that if nobody stepped in, that this was just going to happen. And I was like, well, I say that the most important thing in my life is the faith. I go to Mass every day and I tell Christ in the Eucharist, you're the most important thing to me. would that really be true if I didn't put everything aside, including my grades and all of that, in order to defend him here? So no. So I to heck with the consequences. I'm going to pour myself into trying to stop this thing. And a lot of people said, that's pretty foolish. No matter what you do, you're not going to be able to stop it. They're planning on doing it. All you're going to do is hurt yourself. Okay, but that's not what happened. We all hopefully know that by now. But we started getting a number of things going. I looped in a small group of people, mostly from that morning mass breakfast crew, and we came together. We started making a fuss so big that the media couldn't ignore it. It was op-eds and letters to deans and calling alumni who we knew were important. Talking to the church, who was hosting a holy hour, but didn't have an intention of stopping the Satanic Black Mass. So it got to be the morning of. We had this huge petition. It had gotten nearly 100,000 signatures. So thank you to any of you in the room. Probably some of you signed it. And it made all the difference because we made a stink big enough they couldn't ignore it. But still, it was going to happen. So morning of, it is decided that we're going to do one last-ditch effort. The plan was for me to put on my suit, print out this huge stack of petitions, and take them to President Faust's office with a letter saying why we wanted this stopped. So I put on my suit. I'm feeling powerful. I'm gonna tell her, and she didn't show up for work that day. So there I am, standing in the middle of Harvard Yard with this big stack of papers and all this work I'd done instead of doing my finals, and looking like a total idiot. But that was when the news camera showed up. So then I was the person who looked like she knew what she was doing. And I gave interviews throughout the day. I've got these petitions here, and they show that we're against this. So gave interviews throughout the day, and at the end of the day, I received a call on my cell phone. Aurora? Yes? This is Fox News. I said, oh, my parents watched that. And this is Fox News. We want you to be on Greta in 20 minutes. I said, okay, great. And they said, okay, hop in the unmarked black car outside your apartment. So maybe against my better self-preservational instincts, I did. I went and I gave the interview, and it was so funny because Greta kept asking me. So at this point, the ritual had been moved from the dining hall to some sketchy nightclub nearby, and she says, "Well, what are the Satanist plans? What are they doing? Where are they going?" I said, "Greta, I don't know. For some reason, the Satanists haven't kept me in the loop about their plans." So I give the interview, come back, and there's this holy hour that's supposed to happen. As far as we know, the ritual is still on. But when that unmarked black car brings me back to St. Paul's for the holy hour, there were a bunch of very odd-looking people there who had black face makeup and tattoos. Others had tattoos on their faces, hoods and fangs, and really what I remember about them was this otherworldly look in their eyes, that they were so angry. And these were the Satanists, and their event had been canceled, so they were mad, and they wanted to find the person who looked like she knew what she was doing. So they identified me rolling into this parking lot and came around the car and surrounded me and were threatening me. Unfortunately, at the time, I was dating this buff Cuban law student who just kind of pushed them out of the way. And we made our way up to the holy hour for what I truly believe was the most unambiguously triumphant thing I've experienced in my life. The Satanists tried to break into the church during the ceremonies to disrupt everything. They were apprehended by police. Others of them slunk off and apparently were doing some sort of modified ritual in the local Chinese restaurant. So keep that in mind if you go to Harvard Square. But yeah, I guess the lesson that I draw from this, and the reason why I think it's so worth revisiting a couple years later, was that you can send students to campuses that literally have everyone from apathetic to dismissive to skeptical to fallen away to actual Satanists. And it turns out that sometimes the most radical opposition, this ridiculous group of people who wanted to embarrass the church and make us feel silly, all that ended up happening because of that was thousands of people marched through the streets of Boston adoring the Eucharist. Thousands of people around the world had holy hours. And we are still talking about how God came through for us on that day. So, opposition is not something to be afraid of. Okay, the last point that I want to make, I think I'm running low on time, is that each of us in this room, each of our kids that we're thinking about sending off to college, grandkids, nephews, we are called to be saints. What are we doing about it? So, I would submit I would submit if you want to be a better saint, or a closer approximation of a saint, pick up a copy of my book, get some ideas. But I do want to say just a quick couple words to parents. Most of you who have teenage children probably realize that you can't force them to be Catholic or to do anything else. So there are some things that can give them a better chance. I am so grateful. My parents are here in the audience. I am so grateful that my parents have a long and stable, loving marriage. That isn't always possible, but it was such an advantage for me. I'm so grateful that my dad took the time to catechize me himself, so I had good formation. When these challenges came from secular sources, I was ready for them. And we went to Mass every Sunday. We didn't miss. That was our rule. If we were out of town or at horse shows, since we rode horses, we never missed. And those were the three things that I think really made a difference in my upbringing. But the best thing that you can do for your children is to give your life fully to Christ. It's as simple as that you have to be a saint. And there's nothing more compelling in this world than the example of a saint. I want to end with some words from Benedict XVI, who echoes the theme of this conference. And it's for all of us who are looking at the next stages in life, like I am, and wondering how I'm going to live my faith. And for you, wondering how you're going to bring your faith to bear on the world, and if you're worried about your kids and how they're going to do the same. This is the message that Pope Benedict has for us. If we let Christ into our lives, we lose nothing, nothing, nothing of what makes life free, beautiful, and great. Do not be afraid of Christ. He takes nothing away, and he gives you everything. When we give ourselves to him, we receive 100-fold in return. Yes, open wide the doors to Christ, and you will find true life. Thank you.
Please join us for the 2019 summit at the Monarch Beach Resort in Dana Point, California, January 24th through the 26th, 2019.